Okay, I think we're getting a good crew starting to show up. So yeah, so again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us at our next installment of our OCI webinars. Today's topic is going to be about the cloud dilemma, migrate or modernize. What do you do? I think that's a question many folks have asked themselves in this space over the last several years, and will probably do so for quite some time to come. But before we dive into the content today, let me just put a little housekeeping notes out there. We're recording this webinar today. If you have questions, please post them in chat. Our team who's monitoring our chat will collect those from you, and they'll feed them to me for our Q&A session at the end of the call today. Like I said, we're recording this session, so the session itself will be made available to you and to all the folks that registered for the event. And subsequently, we'll mail out the content, the slides, and links to those artifacts after the event concludes. And with that, why don't we jump right on in? So for those who don't know me, my name is Andy Montgomery. I'm the Vice President of Strategy here at Object Computing. And I intend to be the host of these wonderful events. So I'm excited to do so again today. And I share this time with Tino and Nwamba, who's a partner and our cloud practice lead. Tino, do you want to say good morning? Good day.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? Glad to join. Oh, this is a wonderful conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Tino. And Dave Rodecap, Principal DevOps Engineer and a member of our engineering community here at Object Computing.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Glad to be here.
So we have an exciting agenda today. As in many of these sort of things, because they're recorded, I'll do a brief overview of who Object Computing is. For some of you, and many of you, you probably already know, but we'll dive a little bit into that for those who don't know, and then we'll dive in a little bit about the core problem, like what is the challenge that folks are prompting them to ask this really important question, and we'll dive into a little bit of that, and then I'll hand it off to two of our esteemed team members here who will dive deeper into the approach and methodologies that we've developed here at Object Computing on migration and modernization. Then we'll wrap all that up with the Q&A. And with that, look forward to get going. So for those of you who don't know who Object Computing is, we are a 30-year-old women-owned technology consulting firm anchored here in St. Louis, but supporting clients around the country and around the globe. We really engage really on a sort of on solutions and projects and programs, creating solutions for clients that's based on technology that empowers. We do that as today we'll talk about cloud engineering and cloud architectures, but we do that in a number of different technology verticals, including digital ledger technologies, application development, Internet of Things, AI and ML, and cybersecurity. As you said, we've been doing this for roughly 30 years or over 30 years, and then we've really spanned a large segment of clients, many of which are still our clients today after all those years. With that, let me pose this question. I think without a doubt, and there is a quiz that's popped up, so you guys can take a look at that in your communities as we're going through the content. Without a doubt, cloud computing and cloud growth has continued to skyrocket. It's been on this sort of uphill climb. It's almost like exponential growth for many years now. And Gartner predicts that growth is not going to slow down anytime soon. 70% of enterprises are going to be using these cloud programs to accelerate their business initiatives. That's a significant upward trend, even more from just a year ago. And that as a result, global spending is going to continue to increase with significant growth over the next several years as well. But what I think is starting to change, and this is a question I'm going to want to pose a little bit as we transition into the content, is, this is beginning to change in the sense that, it's not about cloud drives our business. It's about how do business needs and business acceleration are driving cloud usage. As we transition businesses from the existing IT systems they have today to being cloud native, cloud first, cloud anchored solutions, And so, Dave, I wanna push this question to you. This as this paramount moment exists for us, and we're looking to how we transform in the future. Can you explain how we really break down the different approaches that we see to this cloud transformation journey?
Yeah, sure. So, but before we get into that, I think it's important that we define a couple things. First, the first being cloud migration, which we're going to call lift and shift. And really, what this is, it involves moving an existing application or workload from one environment to another, with really no changes to the underlying architecture of that application. There's a variety of different ways that could occur. It could be moving on-prem physical machines to virtual. It could be virtual machines on-prem to virtual machines in the cloud. It could even be moving cloud to cloud. It could be storage migrations. There's lots of different types of lift and shift migrations that we're going to talk about. But for today, we're primarily going to talk about moving applications from an on-prem resource to the cloud. Tino, would you like to talk about modernization?
Sure, Dave. Thanks. Next slide. Yeah. So cloud modernization, this is the process of refactoring or re-architecting an organization current architecture, infrastructure as a code, applications, database management to a cloud-first approach. An example of this will be legacy application replacement or refactoring. And you may have a cloud-based application already in the cloud, and you want to refactor and optimize, or even do some cost optimization. That would be another example. Or possibly an on-prem application that you refactor on-prem, adding cloud-native services. And then once it's fully tested, once it's fully integrated, and then you do a simple lift and shift. And another example of this will be a hybrid architecture also. Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this sounds really powerful, these two approaches, but they could also sound a little complex to folks that are, maybe just getting into this space or looking to how they can do more. Can you tell us a little bit about the framework and methodology that you've used to kind of simplify this approach for clients?
Yeah, sure. So we've identified 5 different areas that our clients should look into, and the order that we present these, we're not assigning importance to them by the order that we're going to talk about them today. These should really be evaluated on an organization by organization basis. And even once you do decide what the priority of these are, there may be mitigating circumstances why for one particular application you may choose to do something different. So let's dive into those areas. So budget's always a concern. Everybody's concerned about how much their cloud spend is going to be. They're also going to be concerned about how their spend internally. Performance is also important, right? You may have reasons to because you've outgrown your existing capacity, right? That may be a reason for you to move to cloud. You may have an architecture that may necessitate a multi-cloud type of approach. And for the purposes of our discussion today, we're primarily going to be talking about using multiple public cloud providers, but it could also be a combination of a public cloud provider and maybe some sort of a private cloud as well. Security is always a hot topic. And that's definitely something that organizations do not want to ignore. And then we'll also talk about the types of legacy applications that you have. So diving into budget. So let's first look at the migration scenario. You might choose to migrate applications, a lift and shift, if you want your initial cost to be low. A lot of times this involves either, like we mentioned earlier, copying VMs from one, your on-prem infrastructure to a public infrastructure. It could be a matter of just rebuilding a similar architecture in the cloud and then just installing your applications and migrating your data. The downside to this approach is that your ongoing costs could be higher because you haven't necessarily taken advantage of some of the cost savings or efficiencies that are gained by adopting some of the modern cloud technologies. This is best for, like we've talked about, organizations with maybe a smaller budget, but they have a need for the quick cloud benefits. On the modernization side, your upfront costs are probably going to be higher. You're going to spend a lot more time doing development work, trying to adopt some of those cloud technologies, and that's fine. Your ongoing costs could be lower because you're now taking advantage of some of the efficiencies that might be afforded to you by taking advantage of the cloud infrastructure. So this is really good for companies that are in a position to really invest in their application and kind of take their time moving into the cloud. Regardless of which approach you take, there are some best practices. You should, by all means, take advantage of all the cost monitoring tools that are available to you in each of the cloud providers. They do a very good job of breaking down where your different spend categories are at. You can look at how many VMs you have, what size they are, what that's costing you. And then also, if you combine that with your performance metrics, you really kind of get a sense of what, maybe there's a particular area that you might need to focus on for decommissioning later on, or picking that piece out to modernize it and make it more efficient, more cost effective for you. One thing that you absolutely must do is put in some good audit practices and monitor the resources that you have out there and regularly clean up unused and idle resources. It's very easy if you don't stay on top of that to have some sprawl within your infrastructure, and then you can find yourself in a place where you wonder, can I turn this off without affecting my infrastructure? So, but there are some very effective tools within the cloud to be able to manage those kinds of things. Next slide, please. So the next area that we'd like to talk about is security. This is a very, very timely topic. So from a migration standpoint, maybe you're satisfied with your current security posture within your application. There's a little bit less potential risk by just going with a straight migration because you aren't introducing something new. Your application is a known quantity at this point. You might choose this if you really don't have any cloud specific security concerns. On the other hand, you may choose to modernize. You may be using old libraries, you may antiquated technologies, or even just I don't want to say bad practices, but older practices, right? There's better ways of doing things now. And maybe by going down the modernization approach, it'll make it easier for you to meet the different compliance standards that your industry may require you to meet. So from a modernization standpoint, this is appropriate for companies that really want to prioritize security and need to meet compliance requirements. Regardless, you need to adopt a zero trust model, right? So this just prioritizes security at every level of your application. Both or all the cloud providers have very good security tools. You should regularly inspect their reports and see where you need to make changes. You may have you may have permissions that you need to tighten down. There may be resources that are wide open and you can just delete them, get rid of them, or maybe you need to do something different. One approach that we do advocate is that you approach moving your applications in phases, right, and test thoroughly as you go through this process of either migrating or modernizing your application. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to take the next one, Dave. Performance KPIs. So one of the pillars of a well-architected framework for the cloud provider is performance. And performance KPIs are part of the metrics that are collected. So if you have a small list of performance metrics, migration will be the best option for you. So for example, I need to re-platform a database to the cloud. So in this case, my performance metrics are going to be very small. I may have 1 or 2 performance KPI. So migration will be my best option. Another example is I'm relocating a VM or a container to the cloud. Performance metrics or performance KPI is going to be very small. So in this kind of scenario, I'm still using the original architecture. I'm not making any significant change to the current application. So migration will be my best option. So for organizations that are looking for those small wins and also maintains the current performance level, you want to migrate. You want to go with the migration route. For modernization, let's look at an example. I have an application where I have a requirement that stipulates that I'm going to be doing cost and performance optimization. So for this particular scenario, I'm going to refactor not only my compute and computer utilization, I'm also going to refactor my storage utilization. And this will also require significant code changes. As you can see, my performance metrics now starts to grow. And I'm going to be creating various log files and possibly using the cloud service cloud services logging features. So by doing this, modernization becomes my best option. And I want to keep track of my progress. So by doing also this, we may have a situation where auto scaling becomes something that I need to do to improve performance. And our user experience becomes an issue because of the fact that this is also an additional requirements that I need to incorporate into my into my code repo. So for organizations that are looking for those long-term strategic goals and driving business innovation, either current or future business innovation, modernization will be your best option in terms of performance KPI. So overall, one of the best practices that you need to establish is you want to establish those performance baselines. With those performance baselines, you'll be able to track progress. You'll be able to track, what should I do? How much code refactoring should I do, either on-prem or in the cloud. I also want to implement continuous monitoring to track performance metrics, because that also will help me to improve not only performance, but also improve cost optimization also. And testing is a big part of this. I also emphasize automated testing. Manual testing, great, but overall, you want to do automated testing. And then your CI/CD pipeline. Take advantage of what the cloud services, cloud provider provides for you. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So multi-cloud, an organization that wants a quick transition to the cloud, to multi-cloud, lift and shift will be your best option in this case. And I can give you a very simple example where I've got an application where I want to improve my caching or edge computing strategy. So this application right now, I'm loading images into, say, an S3 bucket in one cloud provider. And then I'm loading the images also in a blob storage using Azure in another cloud provider. So doing this now, the application itself is very small. I'm only doing a lift and shift in this scenario in order to improve my caching strategy. Cost is really not a big factor in this case because this is just a simple application. By doing this, my migration will be my best option. I'm not making any significant change to the architecture, the current architecture in place. So migration would be good for organizations that need a quick win. The application can still function without making a major optimization. So let's look at modernization. Another scenario may be a situation where I have AWS, I'm using, say, 3 cloud providers. In this case, I've got AWS for my data storage. I'm using GCP for development and testing, and I'm using Azure for disaster recovery. So by this particular scenario, that will also require me to have some kind of a centralized dashboard where I can keep track of all the logs, I can keep track of the performance metrics. And also, I may have another situation where one of the business requirements will be I have a client-facing application in one cloud provider, and I have my database, maybe due to compliance rule, in a private subnet in another using another cloud provider. So modernization in this case becomes I would say the best route for me to take. Scalability, performance will be tracked and be implemented because of the fact that I'm doing modernization. So our application that require high performance, scalability, and advanced cloud features for multi-cloud, you want to go with modernization route. And overall, the best practice in this case, you want to implement a data migration strategy. So a scenario may be where you got data spread across multiple cloud providers. So you want to make sure that you have a data migration strategy that will be optimal. You also want to make sure you have a strong security measures in place because each cloud provider brings they have a multiple cloud native security services that you want to make sure that you take advantage of also. You also want to monitor application performance as much as possible because, again, you've got load that are spread across multiple cloud providers. Testing is a big factor in this case also. You also want to embrace DevOps practices. You want to minimize manual automation, manual deployment. You want to use as much automation as much as possible. And each cloud provider also have a multi-cloud services for scenarios like this. And my recommendation will be take advantage of those and see if that cloud provider services will do the job for you. And training also is a big factor because now you're dealing with multiple clouds, and the way you do implement things, cloud, in AWS may be different from, say, Azure or say GCP. So you want to make sure that your development team, your DevOps team, are in tune with all the cloud services or cloud native services out there. Okay, next slide. So for legacy applications, we're talking about applications that have been, who knows, maybe 20, 30 years old. And you want a quick transition for you, a quick win for you, maybe deploying an application that is in a VM or in a container that is on-prem to the cloud. So the features are still the same, the code base are still the same. You want to keep things as the way they are. So a quick win for you now will be, migration. A quick win will be for you is make sure that the existing user experience stays the same. Cost will be low because of the fact that you're doing a simple lift and shift. And then also, in this case, also rehosting, replatforming, relocation, if you have each one of those scenarios as one of your as a business requirement, migration will be your best option. So organizations that need a quick win and a low cost to the cloud will most likely go with the migration route. And again, you're not making any changes to the current functionality. You just want to do a lift and shift. So that will be your best option. So let's look at modernization. So modernization now, you have an application or you have a business requirement that stipulates that you want to re-architect the existing application. So in this case, possibly take advantage of microservice, event-driven architecture, or serverless architecture. So you want to modernize. And costs will be very high at the beginning, but in the long run, based on the cost optimizations that you put in place, you will take care of all that. And you may also have an application where an old application where the data access, the code, and the UI are all essentially in one file, in one code base. And so the idea now is you want to be able to decouple that. You want to have your database now being in the cloud. And so now your endpoints will now be pointing to the database in the cloud. Now they are not on the one on-prem. So this requires a rethinking of the architecture. You do not decoupling of the architecture. So when you run into that kind of scenario, you do want to modernize. You want to take advantage of what the modern architecture that is in place, possibly using a modern programming language instead of a language that was around maybe 30 years ago. So all that path requires you to do a modernization of your current architecture. So application that requires a high performance, load balancing, scalability, and advanced cloud features, if that's what you have in place, that's your best business requirement, you do want to modernize. So overall, when it comes to the best practices, you want to do this incrementally. You want to modernize a little bit, migrate a little bit, and you want to focus on the key features because, again, this is an application that is, it's an old application. So you want to make sure that your key features were tested, working as it is. And so once you have that, then either you want to do a lift and shift becomes an easy option for you. Data access is another one because of the fact that a lot of times, a lot of these old code base, data access are tightly coupled with the code itself. So once you start to decouple all that, you want to make sure that everything is in place. So again, database may be in the cloud instead of on-prem like it used to be. So you want to make sure that data access is taken care of. And each cloud provider do have a cloud data migration service. So those data migration services, I strongly recommend that you take a look at them and see if they have features that will allow you to reduce the complexity of either modernizations or migration. And as always, test. You want to make sure that you continue testing because this application may be, again, it's an old application. You want to make sure you're not breaking anything. And then training is also a big part of this because of the fact that you may have a development team or DevOps team that are so used to implementing or deploying using an old methodology. And in order to move to the cloud, you want to make sure that they are aware of all the different cloud services. So it could be go ahead and create a specific cloud provider account, create a sandbox, and then start playing with those cloud native services. This also applies to if you're doing a multi-cloud legacy application, multi-cloud either database, migration or modernization. Training becomes a big part of that because you want them to be able to be aware of what is out there in the cloud. So, Andy, do we have any questions on the cloud?
No, yeah, we do have some questions. So Tino and Dave, thank you very much for walking us through the methodology and the framework. This time we want to position questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please, like we said at the beginning, post them into the chat and the team will get them to us. But sort of as we're thinking about this, Dave and Tina, like this framework seems applicable both to large organizations, ones that have legacy footprints, but also smaller organizations, maybe some that they've had an app, but they're trying to figure out how to really use it to really accelerate their business, take it to another level. And so, so I want to pose this first question to you to kind of get at, that model, which is, I'm in a larger organization. So put yourself in that mindset. I'm a larger organization, and I have many apps. How does this scale to sort of approach our needs? How does the framework help a larger organization that has maybe many apps they're going to have to look at and analyze?
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. So as we mentioned earlier, right, we have the five different areas that we want to look into. And I mentioned that while we at OCI don't necessarily prioritize one of those over another, we feel that that's best left to the organization to make that determination. But once you've laid that out, right, let's say security is number one, budget's number two, and so forth, then you could go within, you could set a scale within each of those different categories and decide, let's say within, a budget category, you have a certain amount of criteria in there, and you could say, you could apply some sort of a scale to those criteria and say, an application maybe meets your criteria or it doesn't. And depending on where that application falls may make the determination, okay, within a budget standpoint, it may make sense to just do a lift and shift. But so if you then take that and apply that to each of the different other categories, right? So let's say security is next, and you say, we know that this application has some security needs. We'll say it that way. In that particular case, it may make sense. A modernization approach may be more appropriate, right? And because you may weight, let's say, security higher than budget. So for that particular application, you may decide, okay, this one needs to be modernized. And so really by taking that scoring then, and you could take that and apply that to all your different applications, and then hopefully come out with a list of, hey, these 10 applications, really, we need to modernize. Maybe these 5, we would just do a lift and shift. You may go through that and through this whole exercise and decide, hey, we have some that we can just even get rid of, right? I mean, that's, in some respects, that's actually a better case scenario, because now you're reducing your footprint. So that's kind of one potential way that you could take those categories and apply that to a larger organization.
Excellent, Dave. Thank you for explaining that. It's very helpful. So you guys talked a lot about data, either data migration plans or data security needs. So here's a question sort of in that vein that was submitted. So in my industry, I'm in a highly regulated industry. What is the best method to evaluate my data security needs and compliance requirements to ensure that I build or in a secure cloud environment?
Yeah, so Dave, I can take that one. So each cloud provider have what is called a well-architected framework. Security is a big one of the pillars of those well-architected framework. And so for security, there are multiple checklists that you can go through, and then those checklists will guide you through what your cloud journey will look like in terms of security. So that would be a good starting point. And also, each cloud provider do have what we call a compliance governance rule services. And those also are checklists that you can go through and ensure that you're meeting those requirements. And then each cloud provider do have security features, do have cloud native security services. So things like what we call the IAM roles and permissions, kind of like what Dave alluded to the previous questions. You come up with a metric, a checklist. You come up with a scoring a card to say, okay, now for this particular scenario, what roles do I want to create? What permissions do I want to create? And do I have any cloud native services that will take care of this X, Y, and Z scenarios? So that will be the approach that I will recommend. And we've done this for other clients that we've worked with in the past, where security is a big requirement. We've done this for commercial using commercial cloud provider. We've also done this for, I would say, government or gov cloud, and security is a big factor also. So these are the things that we've done here at OCI, and these are the things that I would recommend. This will be your first approach, and then based on your business requirement, keep that in mind. Zero trust security as always.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, it's I'm reminded as I listen to you guys today, and I'm sort of reflecting on my own career, just how complex the cloud is beginning. I can remember when cloud was new, it was this thing that people looked at, and there was literally just like, here's your access to a CPU, here's your access to an operating system, and it's fundamentally different now in terms of the explosion of different services, things that are trying to make life easier for us. So I'm curious what your guidance is, just given this explosion of capability and power that we get from the cloud. Like, what is your guidance on really how to train team members, how to train employees, how to bring new cloud environments online, how to create that ecosystem of learning? What guidance do you have in that frame?
So for that, you can go multiple ways. And the first thing will be which cloud provider, or say in the case of multi-cloud providers, make a selection. And the basic step number one usually is to create an account. And once you create an account, and then each cloud provider also have, I would say, tons of informations and step by step on what you can do to use a specific cloud native service. And my recommendation would be go through that phase. Make sure you learn what we call the cloud foundation training. Know what those cloud services are, know what those cloud native services are, know what they do, how do you integrate those into an application. Build yourself a very simple application, multiple hello world applications using cloud native services. And once you get comfortable with that, and then just move up a little bit. And so, okay, now I've done this. How do I solution architect using those services? How do I solution architect using cloud native services for a specific scenario? These are the business requirements that I have in place. How do I solution architect that? And once you have that also done, move up a little bit. Moving up a little bit now would be, okay, now I've got this business requirement. And for this business requirement, I've got 4 solutions that will work successfully for this particular business requirement. However, which one is the most optimal solution? So once you get that point, it becomes easier for you to transition your experience into any sort of business requirement that is available, that are out there. And this will actually help you with your client needs, because your clients are going to come up with different, business requirements, business needs. And then you can kind of look at that. So, okay, now I'm looking at cost, I'm looking at performance optimization, I'm looking at reliability. How do I achieve those? How do I achieve those so as to help my client? How do I make it the most optimal, where cost is a big factor for my client, and I want to make sure I reduce that cost for my client? Dave, do you have any additional input to that?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the different cloud providers within their documentations will probably include, different sample tutorials and things like that, right? And so
Mhm.
those are very good things to go through as you're learning how to use some of these different cloud native services. Um, I would advocate, also looking, there's resources like A Cloud Guru and Pluralsight and Code Cloud and different online resources like that an organization or an individual could subscribe to. One of the benefits that comes along with that is that a lot of these providers will also give you access to cloud playgrounds, right? So it's a good safe way for you to be able to go out and play with some of these cloud technologies without inadvertently causing you or your organization to spend a large amount of money on, let's say, an inappropriately sized resource or something like that that just sits out there and spends and churns money. So there are lots of good ways for an organization to train their people. And the other thing, don't go about doing this on your own. There are,
Mhm.
we are positioned to be able to help you with your exercise of either modernizing or migrating.
So Dave, does that also include doing some joining the team and doing some sort of training as we work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I got a couple more questions, or at least one more question. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. Please feel free to drop them in the chat. Would love to answer your questions and dive deep with you. But the last question that I had was, in what instances should you adopt an iterative approach to your cloud migration or modernization? Can you elaborate a little bit more? Like, what are the scenarios? What are the triggers that you look for to take that iterative approach, be it iterating from one to the other or iterating the progress of migrating or modernization?
For that, I can use an example of a past project we've done with a client or two in the past, where we had this type of scenario, and this was more of a legacy application, where the application is probably, I want to say, at least 20 years old, and we started the cloud journey of modernizations and migrations. And those are the questions that each time we look at a business requirement, we ask ourselves, do we need to modernize or do we need to migrate? So for things that were really simple, we had to migrate a database. It was a simple lift and shift, change the endpoints. So that was, I wouldn't say it's very easy, but that was an easy decision to make. But when we got into the actual business requirement, the code, the programming language, the UI, the API endpoints. So this becomes things where we were doing migrations, modernize, and in most cases modernize because of the age of the code base. So that case becomes something that was iterative, one feature at a time, do a test, automate. There was no CI/CD, so we had to create a CI/CD from scratch. So part of that CI/CD creation also means that we do that iteratively. We move one feature, modernize, and then move on to the next one. And then also we, automate as much as possible. And so for that particular scenario, I can see that to be iterative. Another one may be in the case of even like you say, cost, because you migrate, you modernize, and then you go back and look at the logs. You look at the metrics to say, okay, now is this helping me? Am I reducing cost or not? And if I'm not, then I have to go back and refactor what I'm working on or re-architect the existing what the current application look like, so I can keep improving that performance or cost optimization.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'd love to have any more questions from the audience. If you have any, please feel free to submit them. And if we don't get to them, obviously we're going to probably wrap up here shortly. And you still have a question, feel free. We can respond to them through email or whatever else. But Tino and Dave, thank you guys very much for sharing your expertise, your insights, and your experiences with us today. I've learned a lot. I know the audience has as well. I know that these sort of conversations, they're not the kinds that just start and stop. They're the kind of conversations that keep going on
Mhm.
quite some time.
Mhm.
And I know that if you're interested in learning more about how to do this, how to apply the methodology and the framework that Tino and Dave shared, reach out. Matt Bremer is our director of sales here at Object Computing. He would love to field any questions, maybe not the specific answers to the questions, but he would love to take any emails and correspondence with you to learn more about your project and your problem. And then connect to Tino and Dave and the team here at Object Computing to engage and learn more. So if you have any questions or want to learn more, please reach out to Matt. And with that, I want to thank everyone for their participation today. Like I said, I learned a lot. I know you all did as well. And on this journey together, we can create a really impactful outcome.
Okay. Thanks,
Thanks for having
everyone.
us.
Thanks for having us.